Craig Ballantyne is probably one of the most generous people that I've ever met. He's a Wall Street Journal best-selling author, a discipline expert who has helped thousands of entrepreneurs build business that serve their new life versus getting consumed by it. And so the book, The Perfect Week, shares a proven system to help you escape from being overwhelmed. It's going to help you work fewer hours. And what I was hoping today that you, the audience, gets an opportunity to walk away with the exact playbook on what you need to start building the perfect week. Craig, I want to thank you for being on the podcast today.
This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it.
So man, you've helped some extraordinary people. Do you want to give some of the names of clients that you helped? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so big in the real estate space is Sharon Srivatsa, helped him years ago. Amazing. Just such an amazing dude. Shanda Sumter, a big female coach. She was a client back around the same time as Sharon. There's a guy named Jason Capital, who's a younger guy who had a huge following on Instagram. And then interestingly enough, in line with what we're talking about today, he realized he didn't like what he was doing. So he shut it all down and rebuilt a business that allowed him to be free of social media. He didn't want to have to be making videos and stuff. And so a lot of it is that we help people with is life design, right? You can have it all, and you just need to be designing it to move yourself in that direction. I was just, I do a lot of these shows, and I was just on one before this. And what I shared was biggest risk to people that are listening to this podcast and to these types of podcasts is the risk of putting too much on your plate. Like you go to a buffet in Vegas and you've already got bacon and ham, but you put on sausage and it's just the reason. We have these phones that show 1,000,001 things that you could be doing, and we try and do 1,000,001 things, but there's really only like 3 to 5 things that matter in our lives. And sometimes we end up neglecting the 3 to 5 to chase the 1 million things. And that's where things go wrong. And I don't like to see that. And so that's why I do everything that I do.
Well, so Craig, you've written systems on how to build the most optimal day. And then you built systems and books around the optimal week. What was a tipping point for you that happened that you said, I have to answer this question for my life?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I was once a personal trainer and had an online fitness business selling workout programs. And on the weekend, I was a binge drinker. That incongruence in my life, combined with introverted tendencies I had to hold all of my thoughts and problems inside of my head, combined into severe anxiety attacks. I went to the emergency room twice in 2006, so a long, long time ago, thinking that I was having a heart attack. I walked in, my tight chest, elevated heart rate, tingling from the top of my head to the end of my fingertips. And I just went in. I said, I'm having a heart attack. And as a young man, and they took me right to the back and gave me a bunch of tests. It happened twice. And the second time it was 6 weeks. I went through it for 6 weeks before I went to the hospital, and I finally broke down and went in. And, with anxiety, you look like a normal person, but on the inside, there's you feel like death. And so it was the lowest point in my life. And then a couple days after that, second time that I went, the doctor said, there's nothing physically wrong with you. And I was like, okay, well, I got to figure this out. And I remember waking up, I bet, at 7:30 in the morning and going, oh man, I'm already, falling behind on the day. And I realized I need to start getting up a little bit earlier and stay away from my phone a little bit longer. And the next day I got up at 7:25 a.m. because that morning I woke up at 7:30 and I was anxious. So I woke up at 7:25 and then I didn't check my phone until 7:35. And I did that for 7 days. And I proved to myself, hey, I can do this and I can get other work done and I feel a whole lot better. And then the next week I went 7:20, 7:40. And now I had a 20-minute block. And then the week after, notice what I'm not doing. I'm not going from 7:30 a.m. to 5 a.m. club in one night. I went 7:30 to 7:25 a.m. club to 7:20, 7:15. And within 4 to 6 months, I was getting up at 5:30 in the morning and not checking my phone till 9:30. And you want to talk about like ultimate productivity. That was the year that I had a huge breakout in my business. I got my life back together, and the rest is history. Now I do check my phone a lot earlier than 9:30 in the morning, but I've built that system where I get a lot done on the most important thing before anybody else in the house gets up, before anything in the world needs my attention. I've won the day before most people, even have their, are out of the pajamas.
Well, so let me go back to something that you said. The way your lifestyle was working was you were basically binge drinking,
Yeah.
and so you had these habits that were in place. And I don't even know how they got there, but I know for me, I think we grow up watching like how our parents or, other people live their lives. And so we mirror those. And I was just mirroring what was happening in my life without really realizing until I realized it wasn't serving me, and eventually I gave up drinking as well. And, but I also think like, it's not just that. I mean, that's like one piece of it. But I also think that there's all these bad habits we have. Like we pick up the phone as soon as we wake up, and to build it to where you're able to have a distance from it until 9 a.m. is pretty remarkable. Like I said, it
was a BlackBerry, so it wasn't
even, back then. Those were equally as
right,
bad,
the Crackberry.
Right? Like, the Crackberry, right? So
yeah.
You write about choosing between your money and your life, and how do people get clear on that? And when you've coached, and what are some of the examples you can give of how you've been able to get people to get really clear? Because for me and for a lot of people listening, our life is wrapped up in the addiction of our jobs.
Yeah. Hey,
and how do we figure that out? Like, how have you gotten your clients and yourself to look at spending time with your loved ones and getting back? Because I'm incredibly uncomfortable doing it because I feel like the mechanism of connection is I'm slowly losing it because I'm so wrapped up in what I'm more comfortable with, which is work.
Yeah. I mean, so much wisdom in that question. And so a lot of people feel guilty when they're working because they know they should be with family. And then when they're with their family, they're guilty and they feel like they should be working. And I don't know about most of the people listening, but I'm sure they snuck off into the bathroom to check a text message, once or twice. And the behavior is irrational. And when we see it in others, we go, why are they needing to do that? But, it doesn't stop us from doing it. And what we need to do is we need to step back and really identify what matters, right? Really identify what are the 5 things that belong on my plate in life, not the million things that belong on my plate. And so before COVID, I did a lot of workshops around this topic. They were called the Perfect Life Workshops, and we talked a lot about the Perfect Week formula and also building a 90-day blueprint for their business growth. And oftentimes, more than once, there would be this guy come in. There's small groups, like six people in the room, and one of the guys sure enough, he would say, "My ultimate family value is that I want to raise well-adjusted children." And then we would get into how his day looked and how his week looked. And sure enough, he would be working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. And there was an hour commute on both sides, to the office from the office. And you look at that and that's so incongruent with, you just told me that one of the most important things in your life, if not the most important thing in your life, is to raise well-adjusted children. Mm-hmm. And you work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week with an hour commute. How are you raising children at all on that schedule? I understand your wife can be doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but that's not going to happen, sir. And so this incongruence between what we deeply want and how we operate, there's a lot of irrationalness here. And we see it in and we can call it out in our friends and our family, and we can go, what you're doing does not line up with, what you really want. But when it comes to us, we do get trapped in the habits. And there's a lot of stuff around this. This is built into our nervous system now. The stats, like, people check their phone like 700 times in a day or whatever. And if you take that phone away, like, people are like, oh, they're reaching their back pocket. They're looking for it because, again, it's so ingrained in the nervous system. And what we need to do is we need to put space in between these things. A lot of the ways to be more successful in life is not by adding more stuff. It's by subtracting the things that are distractions and temptations, the ball and chain that hold you down. And so we look at, all right, you come to me, you want to spend more time with your family, you want to be more present with your family. You need to, which means you need to get more work done in less time at work. Okay, what if I took your phone away? In most cases, and you can still communicate through other digital devices, but if I took the phone away after you go through your withdrawals of your addiction, you will get more done, think more clearly, and be more present with people. Research shows that if you are out with somebody and sitting at a table, coffee shop, dinner, and there is a phone on the table, you are less present with the person.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, I don't even take my phone out on date night. My wife takes it, her phone, because we have kids and, she want to be able to be in touch with the babysitter and stuff like that. But I do not take my phone out because there's always a temptation. If you're like, I'm never going to pull my phone out, but you are. And so there's always the temptation when it is there. So therefore, remove the temptation. So when I'm working with somebody, we don't look at adding new things. We look at what can we subtract? What can we remove? Can we take an e-brake off your Ferrari? That's going to help you go a lot faster than whether you have the best gasoline in the car or not. Because if your e-brake is on and something's holding you back, you'll never be able to go 120 miles an hour, right? You're going to be stuck. That's what we look at, because what's driven me in life is to find the simplest solution for everything. How can we simplify? Like I started off in the fitness industry. I started off with simplifying. How can I help somebody get the most results in the least amount of time with the least amount of equipment? And you can do that and still provide something that's relatively enjoyable, entertaining for somebody. It's not boring. And then I moved on into how can I help people have a better, more productive day? And then how can we help them grow their business? And a lot of the time it's focusing on the basics and not trying to do a million other things, not trying to chase somebody else's definition of success, not trying to do what other people are doing, but just knowing what matters to you and putting all of your energy and focus there.
So this like leads me perfectly into the next question, but it's, we're all busy, or we all believe we're busy. And I've been in a place where she was my assistant for many years. I think she finally quit me because she was like, you're chaos. But I think one of the things that she had said one time towards the end was, when you feel like your back's against a wall, you add more to your calendar. And it was like a mechanism that I would feel like I needed to just get busier if the numbers weren't where they needed to be, or whatever the case is, right? And so many people feel like they're busy. I'm in mortgage. So what happens with loan officers is they get pipeline and then they want to focus on the pipeline to get it through the pipeline. But we have people that do that. So they waste their time hand holding it when there's somebody else's job to do it. And what that does is it keeps them from getting more deals into the pipeline. And they justify it like, I got to manage my pipeline. So my point is there's a lot of people who feel like they're busy, but they're not productive. And so what's that mind shift that you coach people on that actually matters when like to get them away from really focusing on all the BS, but on what really matters?
So I try and get people to understand that their best ideas, their best thinking comes when they're not in the mix, right? Away from their computer. And so I was working, one of our clients is a property developer in the UK, 8-figure business. And he said, after I had this conversation with him, he was spending time out in the field. And then he said he went home and walked his dog for 20 minutes. And that's where all of the dots he collected, he was finally able to connect and come up with the solution. And so if you go back in history and you look at the famous writers and composers, what they did was they worked for a couple hours in the morning and then they went for these long walks. And if you look at a guy named Keith Cunningham, who used to run Business Mastery with Tony Robbins, Keith's book, The Road Less Stupid, talks about 2 to 3 times per week, he spends 2 to 3 hours in this one chair with a notebook and pen. And that's where the magic happens. A guy named Richard Koch, who wrote the 80-20 principle, he's a billionaire investor in the UK. He talks about hardly working. And he spends a couple hours per week beside his fish pond with pen and paper thinking. I'm Canadian, so I get to say this, but I love America because America just loves to, it runs on Dunkins, right? And it runs on Dunkins, which means I'm going to be super caffeinated and I am going to do a million things and I'm going to be very heavy in activity. But unfortunately, we're very low in accomplishment. And those are two different and very important things. And you want to design your life for accomplishment, not so much activity. Because even if you're busy and you're working 12 hours a day, you can still find somebody who's busy or working 14 hours a day. Like there's no end to being busy. But that's not what we're looking for here. We're looking for outcomes. We're not looking to be in the gym 4 hours a day. We're looking for low body fat, muscles, and a long life. That's and so people get this mixed up. They focus on the activity when really everything is about the accomplishment. So we then have to go now to the specifics. All right, so I've got my pipeline. What is the outcome I want from the pipeline? And how do we reverse engineer the systems that generate outcomes, making sure that these applications get approved, that the bank loan gets approved, that, we don't have any conditions that come up and there's no surprises at closing time and all this sort of stuff. We need to figure out how we build systems and redundancies in place that we can bring in junior officers and they can take over some of the caseload. And for some of our more complex stuff that we've educated and trained our team members so that they're able to take over some of the higher level stuff, because otherwise, there'd never be anything more than a 3-person business in the United States. But clearly it's possible for people to figure out how to build systems, replicable systems in very complex industries. And so if they can do it in theirs, we can figure out how to do it in ours. If we're willing to step back and do the thinking, which is the hardest work of all, that will allow us to build the systems and processes.
I think, honestly, people that I've coached and people that myself included, this is why I could recognize it. I think many people are just afraid to be alone with their thoughts.
Totally. So I wrote an entire book, The Dark Side of Discipline, and it's really about people think, if everybody here was to say, give me a picture of discipline. Oh, it's like the Viking guy with tattoos and a beard. He's like busting out of an ice bath and he's got a big axe in his hand. But just because discipline does not mean you can just do physically hard things. Most people avoid thinking, which is like one of the hardest things to do, to sit there and work on your big problems in life. Like your marriage is going cold. What do most people do when their marriage goes cold? They take up a hobby and, they start triathlons or they start a YouTube channel or something. Everything. People will work so hard to avoid working on the hard thing. People will work so hard to avoid working on their marriage, to avoid, fixing the relationship with their, teenage kid who's growing distant from them. They will work so hard on working hard in their business and getting richer and richer and richer while they get fatter and unhealthier. And that's just, this human nature. One of our stupid human tricks is to avoid the hardest thing. But, hard work doesn't always look like blood, sweat, and tears. Sometimes it looks like sitting there with a pen and paper in front of you and in a room with no distractions and figuring out your life.
But over time, that becomes habit, right? It's like, I started meditating a few years back, and in the beginning, I couldn't do it without focus. I couldn't focus on, the breathing. I would focus on everything that I needed to do in a day, but then eventually it just got easier and easier as you went through it. And so I think, you have to force yourself and get through these difficult moments of quiet, and being isolated, to be alone with your thoughts, and it becomes easier. It's that we just never do it. Most people barrage of info.
So it becomes easier. And the thing that helped me make that leap in my meditation was I went from focusing on the activity, right? Like, okay, I need to focus, to focusing on what outcome did that meditation bring me? Oh, it's bringing me, peace, and I was feeling better. And so again, it's outcome focused. What's the outcome of the workout? It's not, to be in the gym. It's to feel good. It's to look good outside of the gym. And so therefore design the activity and look beyond the activity. Don't fall in love with the activity, but fall in love with the outcome of the activities. Allows you to get through taking up a new activity that is beneficial for you. And so when I started the meditation, it clicked on me after about a couple of weeks. I started very easy. I started 1 minute meditation, and the next couple of days it was 2 minutes of meditation. And then after a few weeks, I was like, I'm not going to focus on the meditation anymore. I'm not doing this because meditation is supposed to be good for you. I started doing it because I feel good when I do meditation. Mm-hmm. And when you make that shift in the identity around the activity and in yourself, that's when you're more likely to stay long-term with something.
Well, I noticed that, you being the discipline expert, I would think that working with you would mean that I'm going to go through massive extremes. I'm in the cold plunge, meditating, right? You would think that, but you just said, you said it twice already, that your framework is never to just start cold turkey and try something. It's like, do it for a minute and then go a little bit further and go a little bit further, but then focus on the outcome. And I think that's a really big connection for me in listening to you, because I was reading it and I was asking myself, could I coach with this guy? And I was fearful. I was like, this guy is it's gonna, but I actually like the fact that you encourage not to go through the extreme, like take it in chunks.
Because listen, I came from the fitness industry, and then when my morning routine stuff got popular, I saw that people who did the extremes, who start with the extremes, whether it's, the hardcore diet, they've been eating pizza for the last 10 years and they go into the hardcore diet, never works, right? Never works. You have to look for what are the things that are going to be sustainable for the long run. And that's in everything from productivity to business to health and fitness, because if it is not sustainable in the long run, you may get results. You may hold your results for 6 months, but in 2 years from now, you will be in the same or worse place than you are today. And because I've been doing this since the turn of the century, 25 years now, I have seen this happen. And it's nearly, if not 100% of the time, that if you go to extremes immediately, you will revert back to where you were at the beginning. And so therefore, there has to be a better way. And the better way is, first, remove everything that doesn't need to be here. So remove all the balls and chains. When I was a binge drinker, I had to remove myself from toxic environments, from toxic people, and I had to shift the people that were good people, but who brought me down to a toxic place of binge drinking. I had to shift my activities with them from drinking to non-drinking activities. I didn't have to give them up. I didn't have to burn the bridges with all my friends, but I just had to remove all the things that led me to drinking. And then that made it almost easy for me not to drink. And then eventually I built up the identity to which I am today, which I'm a non-drinker. So you can put me in a rowdy bar with a bunch of rowdy drunks and I'll still have a good time, but I'm not drinking because I'm a non-drinker. I just don't drink.
Well, this is interesting. I'm curious. I didn't interrupt you, but I'm curious about this. Did you have that framework going into it, or did this come to you after you watched how you got through that tunnel of not drinking, that you said, these are the things that I did looking back? Or did you really approach it with those intentions?
I figured it out a little bit earlier. Removing myself from the toxic people and places, I figured out on my own. That took me to social drinker. And then before I went to non-drinker, I became a person who didn't swear. And that just came to me one day. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to not swear. And I'm going to tell my email list. I did this in 2011, an email list in the fitness industry of 151,000 people. And I emailed the list and said, I decided to quit swearing. I was running an interval workout yesterday. And I just said, you never swear on stage. You never swear in front of your mother, but you swear in front of your friends all the time like you're a trucker. I just don't like it. I'm just going to quit swearing. Somebody swears around me, I don't care, but I'm just not going to swear. It's a personal challenge to me. And so I decided right then and there that I was just going to change my identity. I'm just the type of person who doesn't swear. And nobody's ever said to me like, hey, I noticed you don't swear. So it's all in our heads. Like I gotta drop this F-bomb to be funny. No, you can be funny without one. And no one's even going to notice that you don't swear. And so I realized I shifted my identity there. It made it easy. I continue to tell people about it. So I have public accountability. So nobody wants to be seen as a hypocrite. So I always make sure I stick to my word. And then therefore, when it was, it wasn't until 2021 that I decided to go from like having one drink or two drinks, one drink twice a month or one drink once a month. I decided to just go like completely, mostly because of my Oura Ring stats, which has helped a lot of people realize what alcohol does to their sleep.
Wow.
I was just like, okay, I've had enough. And so I quit and, have forever been a non-drinker since then. But I knew that if I decided to go all in, that shift in my identity would make it really easy for me. And so I read, the day after I quit, this quote came up. I think I was on Twitter at the time, and it said, it's easier to be 100% out than 99% out. And it is, because when I was a social drinker, if I didn't want to drink, but I was going to an event, and let's say, I had something to do the next morning, and people would come up to you and say, hey, you want to drink? And you're like, oh man, I got that thing tomorrow morning, but I know that if I drink, I'm going to sleep poorly, but so I don't want to drink. But then, they're shoving it in your face, and it's like, man, I kind of want to drink. That looks pretty good. Oh man, I'm kind of thirsty. And like when you're 99% out, you have all these mental gymnastics going on in your head, consuming energy. But when you're a non-drinker, you just go, no, I just don't drink. And it's over. And Yeah. And so you don't waste any more energy. And so when you have this identity, this strong identity of who you are, what you do, what you don't do, it makes life so much easier. It makes life
It
so much
really
easier
does.
because you can put your energy into what matters.
It really does. And again, same framework. You went from a binge drinker to a social drinker to a no drinker. You didn't go from binge to no. You kind of eased your way out. It was like, and yeah, to your point, I remember when I remember I stopped with 75 hard. So it was easy to say, oh, I'm on 75 hard. So then everybody
Yeah,
left me alone. But then when I wasn't on 75 hard, I didn't have an excuse anymore. And then, I wasn't the type that could stay a social drinker. It would go from social to binge.
yeah,
No matter what, I always ended up in the binge. So I was like, I can't control this. I have to just say no. And then what did it for me is like your email list. Today's version of that is you go to the gram, and you
yeah,
tell
man.
everybody that I stopped drinking, and then now you're held accountable. But I do think that those things work. If you had not sent
Absolutely.
that email, you might have creeped back into cussing, but it switched back. So I'm going to flip over to there's something you call the billionaire time matrix.
Hmm.
And it's how you actually shave hours off your work week. And this is my biggest thing. This is like the hardest thing for me to do. And so tactically, for those that are listening, this is where you get your pen and paper out, because walk us through that piece of it. Like, how do you coach people into shaving hours off their week?
Right. It's first of all, there's this stuff. Again, we're going to start with the subtraction of all the stuff
Mhm.
that, it's not your job. It can be automated. It can be delegated. It can be eliminated. And especially in this day and age with AI, once you get over the intimidation of AI, you will find that it can really save you a lot of time. And so we are forcing this on our clients. We hired an expert to coach our team, and now our team is coaching our clients because we're saving people a lot of time on the back end of doing stuff that really is an automated task that humans have been doing for so long because that's how we've always done it. And so that's the first place that we look to get people back their time, because now more than ever, there are so many tools that are able to do that. So we need to figure out what's not your job. And so we have people do a time journal, a time audit. And that means it's almost like a food journal. From the weight loss world, it's like, just show me what you're doing all day long, because most people, can't accurately give you that feedback unless they're putting it down every 20 minutes. And so we identify areas where time's being wasted. There's a lot of time being wasted when people are transitioning from task to task, and we help them set up time blocking. Because if you're going from, you're working on mortgage to doing a call with somebody, and then you got to go and do some marketing material, and then you're supposed to go and do a podcast, it's death by 1,000 cuts. Because if each one of those things is an hour, you don't really get into the activity, the thinking activity, for 15 minutes. And so I'd much rather have somebody do a single 3-hour block on a major project than try and do an hour block 4 days per week. That's right. One 3-hour block is better than 1 hour 4 days per week, even though it's fewer hours, because there is so much more opportunity for you to focus and not get distracted and not have to, bounce around like a pinball. And so that's one of the fastest wins that we can get for people. We actually have built this little AI tool called the calendar cleanse, and people would put their calendar into it, and it would
Wow.
spit back recommendations on how they can restructure their days so that, again, like activities are batched together, and you have time blocks for your most important work. Some people call it deep work. We often refer to it as non-urgent important work. So non-urgent important work is like writing that book. It's important, but it doesn't have to be done tomorrow. Whereas, the mortgage that's sitting on your desk, that's urgent and important. And most people spend almost all their time in urgent and important and never make time for the non-urgent but important that is actually going to be the big needle mover in their life. And it's very easy to get caught up in that, right? Because we're being reactive, we're opening our email, we're getting texts all the time, we're not using anything to stop ourselves from getting distracted by the phone. And we teach people to use something like the Opal app, OPAL. And we've recommended this to so many people, but it will allow you to set up your phone so that you could decide, hey, I'm not going to let any text messages, emails come through, and I'm not allowed to access YouTube or Instagram for the next 3 hours. And you set up your phone that way. And now, the biggest roadside bomb in your life, the phone, has now been neutralized. And so, okay, well, now I got nothing else to distract myself with. I guess I'll do some work. And so that's the type of thing that we're looking to set up to claw back people's time.
I mean, look, if you need it, that's big. I mean, one of the things when I'm coaching people with their time management, or when they say they don't have time to do something, I'm like, pull up your phone right now and let's look at your screen time.
Yes, screen time is,
And screen
that's a
time,
real,
it's crazy, how much people have on there. And so, but it's weird how in the last 2 years it's skyrocketed. Like that data's out there. It's just crazy. So when you build these systems with people, you actually talk about boundaries and having non-negotiables. What are some of the boundaries you set in order to make sure that you don't get, because you're a busy guy. Like, the more books you write, the more stages you're on, the more clients you get, you're just getting busier and busier. And what was important last year or 2 years ago, that is, how do you start to build boundaries to keep your calendar and yourself sane around that?
Yeah. So the best thing I ever did for boundaries was have kids. So the first thing I did for boundaries was I got married. And, I used to be working all the time, and I'd work till 8 o'clock at night, which is late for me. It's not late for some people, but it's late for me. And then I was like, I got to have a cutoff. So I said, I'm not working past 5 p.m. I put this on my social media, very much like my swearing thing. And then when the kids came around, I'm done at 3:30 every single day, unless once a week I have a call at 3 o'clock that goes till 4. And then that's it. That's the end of the day, because what really matters to me is my family. And so when you have those hard boundaries, it forces you. Well, if you've been compressed in the amount of work time that you have, you become much better at choosing what to spend your working hours on. And so, for you and I, it took forever to get this podcast scheduled, because I have very limited hours. You have very limited hours. Plus, there's limited hours in which you'll do a podcast, and limited hours in which I'll do a call. So we have these tiny, narrow windows because we have boundaries on it. Because I only do calls back to back. I only do calls and podcasts on Tuesday or Thursday afternoons. That's it. That's the only option you got. And so most people will put it wherever on their calendar because there's no boundaries. And then they'll put it in time where they really should be focusing on a major task. They'll put it in like, I'll be working on this one thing. I'll just take a break and do a podcast. But every meeting that you have on the calendar is twice as long as what it goes on the calendar. So if you have a podcast or if you have a meeting and it says it's 1 hour, it's actually 2 hours, because there's 15 minutes before and after that are just total baloney. And then there's, you're getting ready for it. You're summarizing things. It's all just wasted and lost time. And then there's the 15 minutes before that 15 minutes where you're starting to think about how you have to shut down and get ready for the meeting or for the podcast. And so if you aren't doing them back to back to back, you're just going to end up burning 15 to 30 minutes every time you transition into a meeting. So you must create those rules and boundaries. And then here's the trick, because most people will say, I can't do that because, and the trick is you make the world play by your rules and you do not play by the world's rules. And that is a egotistical mindset shift that you are allowed to have. I give you permission to have that. You make the world operate by your calendar, and people will respect you when they are given rules and regulations by which to play. Most people think, I'll never get any business because if I'm not available after 8:30 or 5:30 or 6:30 or whatever hour it is, I'm going to lose out to some other mortgage broker who's available after hours. No, listen, if you respect your time, other people will respect your time. But if you don't, then they'll just walk all over you.
Yeah, there's a quote. It's something like, can't expect, or no one will, the world won't respect your time until you respect your time.
Totally.
And so, or people won't respect your time until you respect it. So it starts with you, right? And so, yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's hard when you're serving, when you're in a leadership position, you want to serve people to build those boundaries, because people mistake it for, they don't want to give me the time of day or something like that. But it's just, there's boundaries. You got 15 minutes. And
so that's one thing.
We have to meet for 15. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's one thing that I do. I'll be like, hey, yeah, sure. I can have a call with you in my hours. I have from 1 to 1:20 or 1:20 to 1:40. Which one do you want?
Mm-hmm.
Most people think, let's have a call at 1, and they essentially write off the entire hour. Well, no, because most people don't give an end time to the meeting. We all got the start time to the meeting. Nobody has the end time to the meeting. And so meetings run long because, there's no reason not to ramble. So let's have an end time to the meeting and let's prepare. Let's have some, what's the agenda of this 20-minute conversation? And having those things in place is very important, and communicating that and communicating repeatedly that you have to go to something else right after keeps everybody on track. And it's actually beneficial for the other person too. When I say that, I say, hey, listen, I know you're super busy. So I have from 120 to 140 or 1 to 120. Which time is best for you? Because I know you're super busy and you got other things to do. And then they're like, oh, that's very nice. Yeah. It's all the way that you communicate these things to other people that is like Jedi mind tricks to get them to accept and be on your calendar as opposed to being on their plan.
So then how do you get it to stick? Like, as you coach people and you've coached yourself, what I noticed that I'll also do is the moment I feel like I have it together, then I come off track and I start adding again and start like, I feel like I'm in a really good place today. So I normally never take a meeting from 8 to 10, but because I feel good right now, I'm going to go ahead and schedule that meeting between 8 and 10 when I said I wouldn't. How do you get people to stick to building those non-negotiables?
There's a few ways to do it. So first of all is when you think that everything's going great, what most people will do is they'll drop out of a coaching program or they'll stop communicating with somebody who's holding them accountable. And that's when you need it as much as ever, because that keeps you on track. If you do fall off track, what you need to do is look back and go, all right, what caused me to do that? What was the result of doing that? And how can I rebuild the system to make sure that doesn't happen again? Because, even up to a couple of years ago, I was kind of like that. It was like, let me just try and fit another call in at 4 and see if I can do it. And then sure enough, I was at least wise enough to realize when things went sour and I paid the price for, working outside of my boundaries, that I wasn't going to get burned again. A lot of people will touch the stove, get burned, and then go back and touch the stove again. And you have to make the connection between when I do this, I get burned. So I can't do that again. And, it's tempting, especially when you're just getting started or if you're going through a bit of a dry spell in the business, to violate your code of conduct and to violate your boundaries. But it's very rare that it all doesn't come back to hurt you in the end. And so you're better off sticking to your boundaries and letting an opportunity that violates them just go by.
Well, when you say it like that, when you say violating your code of conduct or violating your boundaries, it elevates your boundaries. You immediately, you have to look at them as they were set for a reason and take it very serious. And it is a violation. And how do you get back on track?
Yeah, because they're rules for how you live your life. And, you think of whatever favorite sports game you like to watch, the rules are the rules. And the rules might change. You might be able to change the rules for next season, but the rule of the game today does not change. And so you need to figure out the rules for your life. This is the time I get up. This is the time I go to bed. This is the time I stop working. This is, when the phone is on. This is when I exercise. This is what I do when I walk in the door at home to switch on to being the family person. These are the rules. The rules are the rules. And the rules are not violated, because if the rules are violated, there's a penalty. And for anybody listening, go, man, that just sounds so strict and severe. Here's the thing. When I wrote my first book, The Perfect Day Formula, I had a phrase in it that was almost exactly like the phrase of another book, Extreme Ownership, that came out by Jocko Willink. Same year, never heard of him. He had never heard of me. He put discipline equals freedom in his book, and I put structure equals freedom in my book. Again, it's like wild coincidence. But it is everything, because if you have those rules in place where you are operating according to your rules, you're on time, you get a ton done, you are going to have more freedom in your life. You're going to make more money. You're going to be able to take better vacations. You're going to be able to be present with your family in the evening. You're going to be able to get to your workouts. So you're going to have better health and higher energy. And it's all this cycle that continues in this flywheel that everything gets better and better and better the more you stick to this system. And it's very easy for people to resist, right? Because we watch TV and we watch these movies, and popular music all glorifies the exact opposite of what works in life. And
the exact opposite.
So
It really does. I mean, even the content we watch, it's like it's this grind mentality, and so you wrote about this farm boy morning routine, and you mentioned it earlier, your morning routine. Talk to us about that, like because I think that's always been. I'm always very curious on what people do, and how they operate in the morning. And it's wild how many people do different things and how they function. But I'm always very curious about it. So tell us about yours.
So I realized that I am like most people. And what most people do is they procrastinate. And if you have something that's difficult to do and you procrastinate on it, it becomes exponentially harder to do as the day goes on. So if you have to work on a very difficult case and you don't do it first thing, doing it at 2 o'clock in the afternoon after you've had a stressful day and then you went and had Burger King for lunch and you're kind of tired, it's really hard at 2 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And then if you try and do it at 8 o'clock when you've gone home and the kids are upset and they want a bit more time with you, and then your wife wants to watch TV with you, and then one of your friends wants to come over and have a beer, and then you want to watch Sports Center, well, there's no way it's getting done. And so I realized I'm like those people. If I don't do something early in the morning, it's unlikely it's going to get done as well as it can be done. So I grew up on a farm, and the first thing my father did every morning was he fed the cows. The most important thing he did first thing. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And so when I was a personal trainer, I had to be in the gym at 6 o'clock. I was building an online business, tried building my online business at 7 and 8 o'clock at night after being in the gym for 10 to 12 hours. And it was like stabbing myself in the eyes with glass. I could barely keep my eyes open and they were burning. I was so tired. And so I realized, man, this sucks. But if I get up at 4:30 in the morning and work on my online business for 20 minutes in the morning before I have to shower and then go catch the bus into downtown Toronto, that's probably going to work better. And sure enough, it did. And so either one required sacrifice. This was hard and this was hard. Choose your hard. And so I chose the hard because I knew that if I tried to do it later, it wouldn't get done. It would get done poorly, or I'd quit. And so the only way to set myself up for success was to get up a little bit earlier, and my mind works very well in the morning. And all of a sudden I was tripling the amount of stuff I was getting done, and my business took off. I was able to quit being a personal trainer, and the rest is history.
Wow.
And so what I find with most people is that they wake up, they do a bunch of stuff, and then they go, where did the time go? And it's been activity, no accomplishment. And it really demotivates people when this happens 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. And next thing you know, it's Groundhog Day and it's 3 years later. And they're like, I'm in the exact same position, driving the exact same car. I don't like this. If we just fix their morning routine, we can really fix their lives.
That makes sense. I mean, the morning routine, doing the hardest thing, what do they call it? Eat the frog or something like that. It's like,
that's what Mark Twain said like 150 years ago. If your job is to eat a frog, best thing to do is eat that frog first thing in the morning. If your job is to eat 2 frogs, best thing to do is eat the biggest frog first. That's the exact quote. And that is exact truth. And that is timeless.
Great. All right. So finally, here's how we're wrapping this one up. What was the biggest lesson you learned designing a life that was worth living for you?
Learn to be comfortable in your own skin and run your own race. And so it's not a joke, but in my Dark Side of Discipline book, I wrote a column about how the most disciplined man in the world was Charlie Munger. So Charlie Munger lived to 99.9 years old. He was Warren Buffett's mentor. He was a billionaire. He had everything that a man generally wants: money, power, and respect, wife and kids, right? So he had all these things. He quit exercising at age 18 when he left the army. He liked to eat a box of peanut brittle at night. So he would never do a cold plunge. He was the exact opposite of that Viking jumping out of the cold plunge, right? That everybody associates with discipline. But Charlie Munger got everything he wanted, everything that most people listening to this want. Most people listening to this would like $1 billion. And Charlie got it by running his own race and being comfortable in his own skin. The guy he was 92 years old, and he flew economy to the Costco board meetings on Alaskan Airlines. He just didn't care.
Yeah.
Because he didn't care about the stuff. He cared about what he was interested in. And so he was comfortable in his own skin. And the more comfortable you can get in your own skin, which means you're less influenced by other people's desires and what you see on TV and what you think or what other people think is important. Like, I don't know. I had one Rolex. I won it in a business contest, and I gave it to my brother-in-law because I never wear a watch. I don't care. Like, Rolex it's a worthless piece of equipment to me. I know that offends some people listening, but I don't care. And so letting go of that trapping of life makes my life so much easier. Whether or not you like watches, it's beside the point, but that's the thing. How you do that is you figure out what your values are, what the vision is that you want to achieve for your life. That's your North Star. Then you make a straight line to success for that North Star and you avoid all the detours. And that's life simplified.
It really is. I mean, we operate, very similar to that in what we do here in my work. Like we have the set of values, we have them on the table at all times, and we're like, that's our North Star. Like if any of us
Great.
go off track, we got to do. But I think we also have to do that for our lives. And that's one thing that I hadn't done, right? Is like, what are the values? And sometimes you think it's just taken for granted and they're there. But once you put them on paper and you put them in front of you, I think it makes a big difference in how you operate. So now,
on that point, I was just in Dan Martell's office last week. I was up at a conference, and he invited me to stop by, and so I go into Dan Martell's office, and he's got a big business, famous guy on Instagram, and every room had the vision of the company on a poster in the room, and it was there, and they had dashboards. All these TVs up with dashboards. And so everything was visible. And so, everybody in that company, there was nobody in that company who did not know where they were going and did not know how they were doing. Everybody knew that information. And having that front and center, you go back to Bob Proctor and all these guys in the success world say, you write your goals, you keep them in your wallet, you review them every day. They all say it because it works. Mm-hmm. And so don't get away from the basics.
Well, I'll tell you this. It's so funny. I was thinking about this podcast this morning, and I was like, I wonder if he's ever read Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time.
Yeah, I had Dan on my podcast. Yeah.
Because I think like when I look at this and I look at your book, I'm like, this is like an easier read. It was really good. That one was like both those books I read them in within a 6-month period of time at the same time. And both of them have magnificent, strategies and tactics on how to, build out your week. But what I liked about yours is this idea around choosing, your life, and it puts these things in front of everything. And so, because that is why I wanted to get you on. You sent me these books. And I still don't know why. I was curious, like, how do you pick people? Like, what is it about? Is it something you'll see on their content or something that you decide, okay, I'm going to shoot these out to somebody? Because what you sent me, one day I was just, I noticed that I was doing a 75 hard challenge, and you would every now and then would hit it up. And then one day I received this package from you, and it had like this insane amount of books. And it's so funny because this is your framework for everything. I said, man, one, this is a very generous gift. Number two, I don't know where to start. I'm overwhelmed by it. And you said, just take one book and just read one of them first. And then and this has been your framework for everything. But I'm curious, how do you decide who you're sending these to?
Well, we send them to a lot. And honestly, if you got a blue check mark beside your name on Instagram, you'll probably get one if I see you interacting with my content or something like that. And so our team looks through it, and we try and send a lot out because, I used to go to a lot of events and stuff before COVID and before having kids. And now I got 3 kids under the age of 4, so I don't leave the house that much.
Yeah.
And so this is how I make friends and get connected with people. And I'm introverted by nature. I'm not necessarily an introvert. I don't like to label myself, but I'm introverted by nature. But I know that the secret to life is knowing more good people. Mm-hmm. This is one way. This is the greatness of the era that we live in today, is you can connect with complete strangers on social media and get connected with them and have, get on podcasts. Maybe one day our paths will cross in the real world, but you can grow your influence and you can grow your connections, and who knows what it'll lead to. But that's the mindset I have around, I probably send out, let's see, that package probably cost me about $80 to send out, including mail and everything, because it's not just books, it's one of these kits with these little workbooks and stuff. I probably send out, let's say, 300 a year.
Wow. Yeah. Well, first
off, it all comes back. It
is amazing. And by the way, a lot of the people on my team have purchased your book because of it, but I'm going to share it again because I do think, but let's get it on there. There it is. I think that this is probably one of the best books, business books ever written. If you're trying to get back your time in your day and you want a life again, read his book, The Easiest Read. Craig, where do people find you?
Instagram at Real Craig Ballantyne is the best place. I also, because of the way that I've controlled the narrative and set things up, I hardly get any email. And so if somebody has a question, they can email me at craig@craigballantyne.com.
Amazing. Well, thank you for being gracious to do this.
Absolutely.
I will share all the clips with you as well. And, we'll tag you and everything. But I got to tell you, this was very powerful.
Good.
And I'm going to share it with my team. I'm going to share it with everybody. But I hope that we can move some of these books for you.
Absolutely.
Because this is an amazing book to read. And I just want to thank you for taking the time today and coming on our podcast. So thank you very much, man.
Absolutely. This was a lot of fun.
All right, brother. Thank you so much.